Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Friday, November the 8th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke. And no Stoney today. He had some personal things going on that came up today. So I told him, no worries, I got you covered. Even if I have to do this show solo, it's going to be a good one either way. Once again, got to remember we are sponsored by Sinkers Beverages. More on them later. And if you're watching with us here on Twitter or Facebook, which if you are, I'd be surprised because Twitter is a wonderful app and their live streams are not working again today. So that's always great and fun. But if you are, head on over to the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channel where you can join the conversation we are going to have today about the Will Levis return. Who's that? Wait, how did you get in here? What?
Oh, hi there.
Oh, what?
Oh,
Security! Somebody come and get this man. How did you get back in here?
You think I don't still have all the logins to the show?
Oh my God, that is an oversight on my part. Well, I guess the cat is out of the bag because filling in for Stoney Keeley today is an old friend of the show, Easton Freeze of A to Z Sports. Easton, welcome back. It's been a while.
Oh, it feels good to be back in the saddle, JT. Thank you for finally having me on. I was wondering when the day would come. I said when I left the show, have me on any time. And then I was just like, they're probably not going to ever have me back. Why would they? And it took extenuating circumstances to have me back, which I appreciate. I was obviously not the first choice today. Stoney was, but I'll take second. And I'm excited to be back and talking Titans. This is fun. This is a lot of good memories here on the Hot Read podcast, and it'll be fun to a little role reversal here. I'm the meager guest. I'm here to answer questions, you're in the driver's seat, baby. So let's do it.
We are in the driver's seat, and it's a very topical day because we had the big news that it is the return of Will Levis this week against the Los Angeles Chargers, their only game outside of the afternoon, or I guess the noon window, which is weird, but since they play at 3:25 this week. But he will return against the Los Angeles Chargers, and that brings a lot of, interesting questions about what this Tennessee Titans team will be going forward. Obviously, Mason Rudolph has helmed the ship to a certain extent. I wouldn't say it has really changed a lot for the Titans. He's been able to be serviceable for them, but we are now back on track with what the season was supposed to be about, which is indeed the Will Levis discovery and experiment year in 2024. And so when we talk about Will Levis in this game, this is something I've really been thinking about for the past, 2 or 3 days. And I think a lot of people have been thinking about, inserting Will Levis back into this lineup. Is that going to kind of continue the growth of this offense with what, Brian Callahan and the offensive line and these wide receivers have seemingly kind of found some chemistry and success the past couple of weeks with Mason Rudolph? Is that going to continue, or is implementing Will Levis back into there basically like shooting themselves in the foot? And I think that's a really interesting conversation to have. Easton, I know you have many thoughts about Will Levis versus Mason Rudolph. What are your thoughts on the Will Levis return this week and how he fits back into this offense?
How he fits back into this offense, I don't know. I'm very excited to see on Sunday. I mean, how could we know? It's been a while since we've seen him out there. You're right that they have found their stride. A stat from our buddy Nick Suss at the Tennessean that I think you wrote about on like Monday this week. But the past 2 games for the Titans, believe it or not, first time in back-to-back games, the Titans have had 400 or more yards of offense and been highly efficient, 5.5 yards per play on offense in back-to-back games. Did you hear that?
I did.
I have no idea what it was. It was a very loud pop, like something exploded on my desk.
I don't know what it was.
Now I'm anxiously looking for fire.
Maybe people are outside of your window trying to
It sounded like somebody throwing.
I think someone's trying to get you off the show.
I guess it's completely derailed my train of thought. Anyways, hopefully I don't being engulfed by flames on my desk here as we go. But
return.
Sure. Yeah. Dramatic. What was I saying? Oh yeah, it's the first time they've done that. That thing I just said a moment ago. First time they've done that since December.
400 yards back-to-back games.
400 yards, 5.5 yards per play,
Yeah.
back-to-back games. First time since December of 2020. So it's been a long time since they've played this good of offense in a somewhat consistent manner. Levis, I think, is going to, like, I'm expecting him to look kind of good. I think that the time off has been really helpful for him. The coaches sure seem to think so. And the bar he set for himself before he left was so low that I think by comparison, maybe at least it is a nice return for him. There's the rust you have to consider, right? And I just don't know, not just from a physical standpoint, because they've been testing all that, but mentally, the live reps. I mean, he's getting live-ish reps in practice, right? And he I believe this week he took like 75% of the starters reps. But man, I just don't know what to make of it. I think it's the most exciting element of this game, and I think it's probably a big part of why the spread is what it is, because it would not shock me if this team got killed because Will Levis looks really bad. And it would not shock me if they cover or win because Will Levis looks good. Like the range of outcomes here is really wide to me. So I'm just mostly excited to watch it.
Yeah, me too. I think it's a great experiment seeing how, are we going to see Will Levis kind of conform to the simplicity of this offense that I think we've seen over the last 2 or 3 weeks with this team? Or is he going to go out there and look just like Jameis Winston did last week and throw 3 interceptions and give his team literally zero chance to get back into that game? I think those are the range of outcomes. I do think you bring up an interesting point with the time off. It was an opportunity as well to learn from the sidelines, something that when we were first talking about Will Levis going down with the injury, could this be a possible shadow benching or something of the sorts? Now, I think over the past couple of weeks, we've seen the coaching staff double down that no, he was not benched. He would be the quarterback as soon as he's 100%. And I do believe them and take them at their word there, but it doesn't mean that the things that he would do while he's benched can't also happen when he's on the sideline here, which is learn.
And a little bonus little side effect, right?
Yeah. Watch another guy operate from the offense in Mason Rudolph. And so we talked to Will Levis yesterday when he kind of had those sentiments. And we asked him what exactly was the experience like learning from the sideline and kind of, as he puts it in this clip, kind of playing quarterback from the sidelines. And so here's what Will Levis had to say about, missing some of this time.
And, the different ebbs and flows of the game and how that can call for different decisions or different kind of pre-snap thought processes. It's nice when every single play being hip to hip right there with Bo and Trevor, just talking through the situation, going through the call, what's the thought process, what's the look, all right, it's this look, what are we doing here? Playing quarterback from the sideline essentially, so it's cool getting all those reps from that perspective. I think Mason did a good job, and I'm able to take some of the things that he did and apply that to our offense and continue to develop it.
And so I think when you talk about Will Levis and what he's learned, I think he has learned as the offense has learned. And I wrote over on stackingtheinbox.com yesterday about kind of how I really don't think that this offense is going to change much regardless of implementing Will Levis back in, because as much as Will Levis was also learning during this period of the season when he wasn't at quarterback, I think the offense also was learning. We also talked to Nick Holtz yesterday about how this offense has been different and how much of it truly is on the quarterback. But I think the overall parallels that I want to point out here is that it really feels like Brian Callahan's MO over the past couple of years, whether it was in Cincinnati or this year. It really feels like he has a vision in mind, and it takes just a matter of brute forcing and weeding out what simply won't work and tweaking what does to get to the point where you feel comfortable with the offense. And I think we've seen that a lot of times in Cincinnati with their slow starts, waiting for them to unlock kind of what Cincinnati can be under Joe Burrow. You look back to what they did with Jake Browning last year when Joe Burrow went down, and the first 2 or 3-ish games with Jake Browning weren't exactly great, but we learned in the offseason about how much it was just a conversation between tweaking things with him and getting him comfortable in simplifying some things for him to make the offense churn a little bit better. And I think that can also work for the offense as a whole. Now that he is kind of in control of the whole thing, we've seen a lot of different things, become more simplified, change over the course of the last 3 to 4 weeks with this offense here. And I think that inserting Will Levis back into that more simplistic style of offense probably it doesn't really change much. Obviously, the turnovers are still the biggest point of contention, I think, for Will Levis. I think there's no question about that. Can he continue to, progress through the baby steps of, no longer being boneheaded in his decision making, but now maybe being a little more thoughtful, maybe making more of those normal quarterback mistakes that we see? I think that's the biggest thing for me. But in terms of operation, I think that he has learned as this offense has learned.
I think you're right. The thing for me that is most interesting from a narrative standpoint, little tomorrow's headlines today for you, the discussion, if this doesn't go well, will be about how he's the problem, right? I know that because it's what we did when he left in the first place was, well, he's gone. Let's see if he was the problem. And then they play in Buffalo and they play in Detroit and they get beat 117,000-2. And yes. That narrative melted away because people quickly realized what some of us were saying before Levis was gone. Hey, you've got a quarterback issue, but you also have a handful of other very significant issues too. It's not a quarterback away kind of deal right now. Now they've stabilized the past 2 games, and offensively at least they have stabilized. And so we're back in that position where he's the variable that is changing here. We know the numbers offensively for the last 2 games have been quite good. Just the vibe, it looks close to that vision like you were talking about of what Brian Callahan and company want it to look like. So he's going to be, he is set up to be scapegoated here if it doesn't go well. I think there's also a redemption arc possibility because if it goes well immediately, or, I think there's the rust element of it. I'm personally going to be I'm going to give him the first half of this game personally to get back into it. If it looks terrible all game, I'm not going to say, well, it was the first game back. But, I wouldn't be surprised if the first quarter you're like, ooh, second quarter, it might take a second. It really might. But if it works pretty quickly and it doesn't look like they've lost a step offensively, even trend in the right direction still, continue on this trajectory, then I think we may do some revisionist history of, well, shoot, we all kind of wrote this guy off at the beginning of the season. When he left, we realized, oh, it's not just his fault. And now in hindsight, now that it's working, now that they fixed the offense that was around him, and now he's around them again, and it's working, maybe we need to once again reconsider Will Levis. Now, I'm not saying that is a smart way to think about it. I think there's still, as much as people are out on Levis, and it's like the book is closed, the story's written, it's just a matter of time. I really do think there's a world in which 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, mid-December, around, right in the thick of the holidays, we're all on our various shows talking about how, it's kind of what's the comparison? Justin Fields in Chicago at the end of that run kind of deal. Now, there's no Caleb Williams waiting on the horizon, so it's slightly different. But in terms of should we not kind of deal with Levis, I think there's a possibility that happens. And I don't know, for you and I, we would invite that because then people are interested again. But again, and Kenneth in the comments giving me a hard time. I'm not saying that this is likely. I am not. I talked all about on the A to Z shows this week, talked all about how I have a very lofty bar for Will Levis to redeem himself down the stretch to make us consider anything about Levis in 2025. And you can go and listen to that argument or read about that argument because I'm going to post about it tomorrow. But I do think that it's possible we are having these conversations. And then I get to really blow your mind when fans are starting to be back in. And then I get to be the heel once again and say, you're wrong. You should be out. So it's just everybody gets to flip seats and it's a whole mess down the stretch, but at least it's interesting.
Oh, I would invite interesting mostly because I'm already tired of the which quarterback are they going to draft in April? I'm tired of it. I can't do it.
I had to sit down for an hour-long meeting behind the scenes at A to Z today with the draft team for our Titans draft foundational meeting, which is frankly necessary at this point. I hated it because it was basically them telling us we're forcing you to write about the draft a little bit now because you have to. And I begrudgingly agree because as much as it hurts my soul, they're not wrong. And if this team keeps losing, they're definitely
Yep.
not wrong. So I'm with you. I don't want to do it either. Please win for the sake of us not having to talk about the draft in October, November, whatever it is.
And over here, it's at 4:40. The pre-draft board meeting was me and Stoney drinking whiskey, saying, "No, we're not going to do it. No, I'm good. We got football."
There's an element to the 4:40 meeting style that I do miss. Corporate Zooms, whatever you guys do. I do miss the I do miss the impromptu. It's every day is casual Friday over at 4:40.
Oh yeah. Well, to some of the shows, right? To our show, very
that's right. I heard things have been a little buttoned up since I left on certain shows.
We'll leave it at that because we do have other things to talk about here.
I wore buttons today.
Good for you. I wore a sweater and a hat. So, I think there's a lot of variance with Will Levis, but I do think that I'm going to at least give him, like you said, the benefit of the doubt, because when we talked to Nick Holtz yesterday, it really felt like they feel a lot more confident about the operation of the offense right now than, say, they did going into like a Miami game or going into that Indianapolis game. And I think there's a couple reasons why. First of all, this is what Nick Holtz had to say when we asked him, it feels like this offense has kind of started to go in the right direction and they're figuring a lot of things out. What exactly has changed for you guys in your operation? And here's what he had to say on that matter.
I think we're doing everything differently than doing this season, but the way the whole offense has evolved and kind of the things we've changed and tweaked and things like that, we want to keep building on those for for any of the quarterbacks that are in there. So I think that'll stay the same of kind of the way we've called it, the way we've game planned has kind of stayed in that realm where we do our game plan just a little bit differently than we did in the start of the season, and it showed off a little bit.
Is that something that feels like you?
And there you go. A little shout out for you as well. But
was that me?
I think it was you.
I think it did sound like me.
But I do think that the beginning of that answer where he kind of the classic Nick Holtz overshare, then backtrack after
the weekly daily double
where
there's always one. You got to find it.
Well, we're going to get to the other one as well in a couple of other clips here down the road.
Right.
But it felt like he's like, we've changed everything with this offense. Well, maybe kind of it does feel like there has been a point to where this offense has shifted what it's been. And we saw that a little bit last week with Tony Pollard putting up his best, game of his career. It feels like career as a Titan. The offensive line, even though it is now banged up and they're once again going to throw out yet a different combination of guys, although not really their fault, nothing you can do with the Lloyd Cushenberry injury, but still just no continuity there on the offensive line. But it looks like they're also starting to execute a lot of that run scheme a lot better than we've seen them do over the first 4 or 5 games for sure. And so on top of that, it's like, how much can really Will Levis mess up here? And I think that's the biggest question. And that's what what we're going to find out on Sunday. It's how much can Will Levis actively be the guy that derails them? And this is what Nick Holtz had to say about, the confidence of how much of the burden of the operation of the offense truly is on the quarterback and how that entails to what Will Levis is going to do this weekend. Here's what he had to say.
I don't think it's all on Will why the passing game has improved or all on the quarterback position. I think our pass protection has been a lot better. I think the receivers, our drops are down, all our assignments, I feel like we've done all those things well. So we kind of expect him to jump in with that progress where we've made the last couple weeks. He's got and I think there's probably a bonus for him kind of watching and learning and taking a step back too of watching Mason play. And Mason played really well, got the ball out in a lot of spots and was able to avoid sacks, and that's kind of something we want Will to build on as well.
And here's the big thing for me, right? It's that I think that no matter what Will Levis is going to do this weekend, the offense has changed for the better, and here's why. It really does feel like this offense has improved the last 2 weeks because of the addition by subtraction, in which, unfortunately, like for Titans fans to hear this, getting rid of
DeAndre Hopkins out of the
getting
locker
DeAndre
room.
Hopkins out of Tennessee has
Come
really
on.
been a good thing for this offense. I mean,
You think so?
I think so in terms of now getting Calvin Ridley as your de facto number one wide receiver, we've seen the passing game like have more success over the past 2 weeks than we saw them ever have with both DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley on the field. You also take Treylon Burks out of the equation here.
I was about to say, I take your addition by subtraction and raise you an addition by addition by NWI. He's the real key that is unlocked.
Also, NWI, which we'll get to. But I mean, when people talk about getting, a guy like Calvin Ridley going as the wide receiver one, I think there was frustration with him getting him going. But when you look at what he's done over the past 2 weeks as basically the number one option, it is staggering to see what he's been able to do with that type of target share as the main guy here. And so when I was writing this article about how the offense has changed and whatnot, I went over and used fantasy points data, which is one of my favorite data suites and analytics to use for this. And when you look at weeks 8 and 9, Ridley saw a first read target share of 40.8%. That is good for 6th among all receivers in that span. And then when you look at it and take it a step further and look at his yards and his receptions along the entire span of those 2 weeks, his 45.7% share of air yards on this offense over those 2 weeks is good for 8th best among wide receivers. He's up there with the guys like Tyreek Hill, Marvin Harrison, Zay Flowers, Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, and Malik Neighbors. Like, even if you want to say DeAndre Hopkins was a very helpful wide receiver for this Titans offense this season, having Calvin Ridley take that number one alpha role has vaulted him over the last 2 weeks, which are the 2 weeks we've seen the Titans in the weeks that we think have really been the best looking offense for this Titans team. He has been the number one guy, and he's playing like a number one guy again. And I would love to hear what you think about what, because obviously I think you disagree with me about DeAndre Hopkins, subtraction here a little bit. And Kenneth also wants to push back and says, I'm wrong because getting Will Levis out of the lineup is what helped. Like, I can go a step further here. And in a big thread I put, like, Will Levis's numbers over weeks 3, the little bit of 4 he played, and 6, his completion percentage and his CPOE and his ADOT were actually better than Mason Rudolph's 3 starts against the Bills, Lions, and who they just played, the Patriots. Like, his first read, like Mason Rudolph, when he was in there, his first read target, like who he's targeting on the first read, was more than what Will Levis was when we thought he was maybe making a little bit more progression over those boneheaded mistakes that he made in the first 2 weeks. Like, he was getting more and more efficient with every start. And of course, it's hard to kind of project where that would have gone, because I think half of that Indianapolis game really comes down to he simply should not have played that game because the arm strength simply wasn't there. And how much can you really take that at face value? But like, I really don't think that this offense benefited too much from like Mason Rudolph. Like, he was serviceable, but at the same time, like, I don't think you were gaining anything that you didn't already have. I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. And I don't know. I know you've watched the tape as much as I have, and we've talked about this for you and I for weeks off the record. Like, it doesn't look that different in terms of how, like, Calvin Ridley downfield, where he is, where they're trying to get him the ball, the levels of the field that they're using him at, the route concepts, the route diversity. It just feels like they've started getting him the ball. Now, I know that the first read rate has gone up. So like there's a coaching scheme element to them force feeding him a little bit, and they're capitalizing on that. But I do think a lot of it is just the quarterback getting him the ball, getting it on time, getting it accurate, and Calvin's playing well. There's a couple of instances where you're like, that one's on Calvin, but the vast majority of the disconnect, not the connections, but the disconnect this year, to me, has been the play design, the decision-making, and the accuracy on the quarterback's part. So I don't know. I think it will be really, that's another really, it's tangential to the Levis, how he plays, but another really interesting element to this game is how well that connection holds up when the quarterback is switched out.
Yeah.
We know they've seemingly had chemistry issues so far, but they've also got a lot of banked reps together. So I don't know. I'd kill to know what the coaching staff thinks in terms of their concern level for, oh gosh, is this going to work still? It feels like we finally figured it out with Ridley, who we paid $1 gajillion. I'd really like for this to still work. But you know what? If it doesn't, you just spam NWI and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, right. And here's what Nick Holtz had to say about NWI in his classic overshare here, where, spoiler alert, they should have maybe had him be the wide receiver 4 over Treylon Burks all along. Here's what he had to say about NWI's monster performance over the last couple of weeks.
How could you not want to get Nick more involved now? Every time we throw it to him, it's a first down or a touchdown. You look back and you always kind of sit there and say, God, did we miss something not playing this guy earlier or getting him all these targets earlier? And we had so many guys. We had D-Hop still here. We had Burks getting reps. We were getting all those other guys in a little bit. And God, the compliment to him is just how he works and how he carries himself. And every time he gets an opportunity for us, he's made that play. So, yes, to get Nick going even more and more, and he's kind of a factor in the offense. He's the starting X receiver, and he's done a great job. We just want to keep building on that. So we're pretty excited about where he's been, and we're really happy for him too.
Man, that
good question, Nick. Yeah, I wonder
what would have happened. I think, but I mean, he does. I think it is hard given the optics of it all.
He's not wrong. You just can't. Don't say it.
Yeah, you cannot say that one.
Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
Maybe we got to get him some lessons in coach speak. But I do appreciate him being candid and honest.
Him and Anthony Richardson. We're gonna sit them both down and say, fellas, you got to learn how to lie. Got to do it.
Yes, exactly. But we joked for a long time about how you don't want NWI to be your wide receiver 2. And in the year of our Lord 2024, NWI is being a serviceable wide receiver 2 on this team right now. And so I do like you said, that also is a big factor that Nick Westbrook-Akine is stepping up in a major way for this offense. And I think that's going to play into this game against the Los Angeles Chargers this week as we move on here to kind of, I want to talk just a tiny bit about what I'm calling this game, the Misfit Titans revenge game this week. When you talk about how many former defensive players that the Titans let go or seemingly had issues or butted heads with over the years are now on the Los Angeles Chargers on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's a really interesting one. But before we get to that, have to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Sinkers Beverages, over here at the Hot Read Podcast. They have been serving the East Nashville community for over 40 years. They are 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, including this year, 2024. And you got to join their in-crowd for all special benefits, allocations, and bi-weekly tastings that you can only know about when you sign up for their in-crowd. Got to give them a follow also on their social medias at SinkersBev on Twitter and sinkers.nashville on Instagram. And if you can't make it out there yourself, no worries. They have you covered. They deliver the booze to you. Simply search Sinkers on Uber Eats, and they drive so you can drink responsibly. Have to give a shout out also to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, who have been serving that location for over 50 years. All right, Easton, it is the revenge game for the Misfit Titans this week. When you look at how many defensive Titans are on this Chargers team. I mean, you talk about Christian Fulton, who I do have to give him props. He is paying homage to his time in Tennessee, where he is now listed as doubtful this week to go against the Titans after missing practice all week. Incredible performance, imitation there is spot on. But then you talk about all the other guys on this team that will probably be playing decent, snap shares this week. You look at a guy like Elijah Molden, you look at a guy like Bud Dupree, you look at a guy like Tier Tart, all these guys who are on this team. Easton, what for you is the biggest thing for the Titans this week in terms of how they need to kind of execute?
Well, by the way, I just came across the desk. Christian Fulton, doubtful with a hamstring, which is just a crying shame. Some things just never change. The biggest thing for me, so in terms of offensive execution against these defenders, is being not just the Titans defenders for what it's worth, this whole defense, because it's a strong defense. And I think that the biggest thing for me is the efficiency that Brian Callahan has preached, that they've leaned into. It is minimize. I mean, they've been a strong turnover defense, if I'm not mistaken. So they have to minimize the not just mistakes, but turnover worthy plays. Last time the Titans were in a tough competition that they didn't win. So, as you know, all of 2 weeks ago, they were fumbling the ball. That was not just a quarterback issue, but they were also turning over the ball in through the air, and the snaps were not being handled correctly. And just all of these little sloppy things that they cleaned up a good bit against the Patriots. They won a turnover battle. How about that? They need to do that again against this Chargers team, because they are a stingy unit. They're a group that will make you pay for your mistakes. And so just do what they do. Play clean like you did against the Patriots. I really don't think it's any more complicated than that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their turnover margin. I think plus 13, best in the league. But you look at who some of those came against, like a Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, who actually didn't give. I don't think he did, but had a turnover.
Will you be shocked to see Will Levis' headstone added to that graveyard?
No, I probably would not. So executing there is the biggest thing. I think also one of the biggest things is, as Eddie points out here in the comments, the offensive line keeping up with how they've done over the past couple of weeks, especially with Lloyd Cushenberry going down. He says, Cush going down terrifies me for this line. However, I feel like, from comments from Brian Callahan today, it seems like they have a lot of confidence in Daniel Brunskill, who will be filling in there probably at center.
He's a serviceable player, man. It's a drop off, but it's not a catastrophic one.
No,
it's not like when you lose your tackle and it's like, oh, we got to roll out Jalen Duncan, and then you're just screwed.
Yeah, I mean, earlier today, Callahan said he's probably our smartest lineman, talking about Daniel Brunskill. And on this show, me and Stoney have talked about how we think Daniel Brunskill is their second best offensive lineman overall, just because of the way they deploy him as a tackle or as a glorified tight end packages. In those packages. And I think that that is, I'm not too concerned about that. I feel like they're in a good spot, especially with the rotation that Bill Callahan has. Ajinku and Leroy Watson and maybe Isaiah Prince.
You're gonna love the 3-man rotation
or the 4-man rotation.
4-man.
I don't know.
Wait till Jalen Duncan gets that hammy healed.
5. Let's
5-man rotation.
Every snap. Get a different one in.
The freshest tackle you're facing as an edge rusher. Every single snap.
The bottom line for this game, I think if the Titans are able to execute like they have, in spurts in the Buffalo game, a little bit in the Detroit game, and then especially last week, if they continue to play this complementary style of football, this is not a Chargers team that I think is as good as their record says they are. Like I do think that, when you look at Justin Herbert and what he can do, I think he's playing some of his best ball, but this is not an offensive weapons unit that can really get after, is not going to really bend you over. Like, we're not going to be sitting here and saying that this game is decided by a Ladd McConkey or Quentin Johnston.
What really can you do when you face Quentin Johnston?
Yeah, I mean,
there's Jamar Chase, Quentin Johnston,
and then Justin Jefferson.
Who else is on that list? NWI is somewhere in between the two.
And then the defense, if you're playing non-turnover ball, that is, I think, the biggest key here. Like, if they come out of this game clean, I think they have a great shot of winning this game. And I think that is the bottom line this week. All right, Easton, I know we have to get you going here along the way, but we can't leave the show without bringing back a 1-week event only cage match of the best bet gauntlet. We're going back to the old rules here. Easton and I went back and forth and picked games this week, like we used to.
Old times.
Five games each. It was pretty dicey in the text messages too. It made me feel the suspense as well. But without further ado, I won last year by a heavy margin, and I guess that still continues.
Is crazy. That's some revisionist.
That continues to transfer over, and so I do think that it is still your turn, and so you are up first with your first pick.
All right. Whatever. Let me remind myself of my picks, and rather the order of the picks here that we made earlier. So yeah, okay. I was assuming this is my first pick because it's such a good one. It's the obvious one. It's the disgusting one on the board this week. There's a couple of them. Yes. How about a little Which team in the league is on the largest losing streak right now, JT? They've lost 7 games in a row.
Oh, would that be the New Orleans Saints that failed my glorious king, Spencer Rattler?
That is right. I'm going with New Orleans plus 3.5 at home against the Falcons. This is a textbook play. I played this spot 10 times out of 10. You have to hold your nose. A divisional opponent at home dog of over a field goal is as copy paste as it gets.
Yeah.
They're also benefiting from the fired head coach bump, the often reliable fired head coach bump. Heard some reports this week out of the New Orleans camp that, some maybe a little not too much love lost for the Dennis Allen experiment being over, and this new guy, the Rizzler, is in town. Their interim head coach was Rizzy. What's his name?
I think it's
Rizzy. It's
Rizzy.
Rizzy.
Like
It's something Rizzy.
So. Yeah.
I'm calling him the Rizzler for the rest of the next 9 games of his NFL head coaching career before he gets fired again. Yeah. But I'm rolling with those guys, and it's the head coach bump. It is the desperate element of this team dying to get back on the horse. You got Derek Carr back, who I despise as a not as a human being, but as a quarterback, I can't stand him. And yet he is better than the quarterback play they've had in the recent weeks. And I think this is the bottom of the market for New Orleans. I think it's a buy low, sell high. No, buy low, sell high spot for the Saints and the Falcons. The Falcons riding pretty high right now. I just like the spot. So you just have to cover by a field goal at home against a divisional opponent. Shouldn't be hard. Give me New Orleans plus 3.5.
Yeah, I like that pick. I would have made it if you did not. Kind of says easy pickings for Easton. JT has sucked. We're not going to talk about that right now. But when we go back
to
the
professional bettors have sucked this year.
I mean, when we go back to the main format here, I'm under pressure now. I have to perform. When we go back to this,
gotta clutch up.
Yeah, I gotta clutch up. And so with my first pick, I'm taking the Indianapolis Ponies to bounce back with Joe Flacco this week, plus 4 against the Buffalo Bills. Over the last decade, teams to fail to even have one red zone trip the week prior are actually 62, 45, and 3 against the spread. That's 58% in their next game. That includes the Joe Flacco-led Colts last week. That was their worst offensive performance of the year. 6 points, 0 red zone trips, 13 first downs, 227 yards. All lows for the entire year. I don't think that's indicative of the Shane Steichen offense. I think it certainly, has to do a lot with the weirdness around the Anthony Richardson situation for this team. But I know that they want to get back in the win column because I know they're not out of it whatsoever. This is a team that I think is going to be able to surprise some people against a Buffalo Bills team that is very good, but is lacking some of their top weapons in terms of health. And so when you look at that, I do like what Joe Flacco is able to do, especially being a 4-point home dog. I really like them this week, so I'm going to take Indianapolis plus 4.
I dig it. It's gross. My second pick, I'm taking San Fran. They're plus 5.5. On the road at Tampa Bay. Listen, this year when San Fran wins, they tend to win by 6 or more points. And when Tampa Bay loses, they tend to lose by 6 or more points. So I think San Fran wins this game. I know that they are a road favorite, but I just think that the way that this Tampa Bay team has been decimated in recent weeks, you're still not getting Mike Evans back for this one. He was ruled out today. San Fran, I think, getting a little bit healthier. Christian McCaffrey, if I'm not mistaken, still a potential return for him on the docket this week. I just think that and I also just have implicit faith in San Francisco as a perennial contender to turn it on here on the back half of the season and win games like this. So when they win big. Give me San Fran minus 5.5.
Yeah, with my next pick here, talked about it. As long as they can not make turnovers, I think they win this game. And that is the Tennessee Titans going to LA this week to cover.
How many times have the Titans been in the gauntlet this year in my stead? I'm guessing not a ton.
Like 3, and they were the first 3 games of the year, and I just learned
lost.
Yeah, I learned my lesson after that. But I'm going back to him this week at plus 7.5, and really it's mostly because the Chargers are just very good at the under in a lot of their games. Like they are 7-1 to the under in the full game total this season, going under by the total of 7.7 points per game. Like if you're telling me that they're really good at the under and they play close games where they're not scoring a bunch, and you're giving me the Titans plus 7.5,
low under, big spread, another textbook play.
I just have to play it, and it's certainly, as we've seen in the chat today, Like I'm a lot higher on Will Levis's bounce back performance here than I think some other people are. And I think that they have this offense looking a lot different than when Will Levis last played. And so I'm going to take Tennessee to cover plus 7.5 against the Chargers.
With my third pick, give me the Jets. I'm taking the Jets at the Cardinals, road favorite again. Not typically my MO, but I think the Jets -2 at the Cardinals is a good play here. It's really just Jets money line. I think that they win by a field goal or more in this one. And so I'll take them to cover the 2. These are 2 teams that I think this is a pretty telling game for 2 teams where you're kind of like, is it real? Is it not? More so for the Cardinals than the Jets, because I think the Jets are a buy low spot right now. I do think that Rodgers and the faith that he has built in this building, not his faith in the group, but the group's faith in him and in this team to stick it out, figure it out. I think that they're going to win some games here down the stretch. I don't know if a playoff push is necessarily on the table for them, but I think that the Hall of Fame quarterback with Hall of Fame talent around him will figure it out. And so I also, as much as I love this Cardinals team, they're scrappy, they're fun. I don't think this is a spot for them. So I'm taking the Jets. The smart money also this week, the big money is on this Jets team. It's a pretty popular pick amongst the professionals. So I'm going to ride with them. Jets -2 at Arizona.
Yeah, and everybody's saying that I just gave Will Levis the kiss of death. Levis death confirmed.
You might have.
It might have. Maybe that is the problem.
Is on you.
But with my next pick here, I am taking the Washington Commanders -2.5 here. Listen, this is the public side this week, but I'm going to fade. Like when we used to do
Joe
this,
Public's been cleaning up this year, so
when we used to do this, I'd always have 1 or 2 picks where I
You
would
would.
be with the public, and
you were good at picking those.
And I just cannot see why Jaden Daniels can't torch this Pittsburgh Steelers team. I mean, when you look at what rookie quarterbacks are doing this year, they are 11-0 against the spread when listed as a favorite and 9-12-1 against the spread when listed as an underdog. And Jaden Daniels has been doing the heavy lifting there. 7-1-1 against the spread through 9 starts, including 5-0 straight up and against the spread as a favorite. You know, when you look at Mike Tomlin and what he's been able to do here, you know, you never really want to go against him. But when the Steelers have the worst record as a road dog, Tomlin is 17-10-1 against the spread, certainly not his biggest margin there. And then when Tomlin is a dog, when his team is above 500 straight up, Pittsburgh is 5-8-1 against the spread since 2021. I know they're on some extended rest, but Jaden Daniels is just the best player in the NFL right now. I mean, maybe Lamar after that performance last night, or Jamar Chase after his performance. But in terms of what we've yet to see, Jaden Daniels is as hot.
Right.
Yeah, right. Jaden Daniels is as hot as anyone. I think this team is really believing in themselves right now, and they play some good defense too. And Russell Wilson is not the Russell Wilson of old per se, and so I like this team a lot this week. So I'm going to take the Washington Commanders -2.5.
Speaking of Russell Wilson of old, I'm taking, I don't like it, but I'm doing it. Give me the Denver Broncos +7.5 on the road at Kansas City, another divisional game, another spot where Kansas City, when they win by 4 or 5 or 6 points this year. This is something that we have been betting on and profiting on in the Hot Read podcast for years at this point. Mahomes as a big favorite, you fade, and as a small favorite, you bet. And this is a big favorite spot against a divisional team that is going to give them their best. This Chiefs team not playing nearly their best ball right now. I think that the Broncos cover and lose decisively at the same time. So give me Denver +7.5.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. With my 4th pick, taking Minnesota -6.5. Listen, they're one of the hottest teams as it comes by right now. 2nd in EPA per play, 4th in success rate, 4th in EPA per drop back, 1st in EPA per rush. In 1 fewer game played, the Vikings still have 9 more quarterback pressures than any other team, with the 2nd highest pressure percentage in the NFL and the highest blitz percentage yet, right? Well, guess who they get to play this week? They get to play the best backup in the AFC South, Mac Jones, and I don't think that's going to be able to even stop them this week because Minnesota's playing just so good. I like them to win.
That's crazy that our backup argument, that's probably my favorite part of the end of our era, we get to see them both start in back-to-back weeks against the same defense as a...
This is going to be a great litmus test, right?
It is a great litmus. It's a control there. It's also against like the worst possible defense to go against as a backup. Yeah. So it makes it just a disgusting watch on both ends. I mean, Joe already got killed by him. I think Mac Jones, might get sent back to college ball by this Brian
Well,
Flores
hey,
defense.
you know what?
So
If I
we'll
have to
see.
concede, if I have to concede the argument so that I win the week against you in this cage match, maybe that's an okay trade-off. So,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
taking
win-win for
Minnesota,
you.
and I think that
Now-
leaves us with one last one here,
That's
right?
one last pick, and it's a
And
little head-to-head action.
A little head-to-head. You want to send us out?
Yeah, let me give you my side. This is the Houston-Detroit game. I'm riding with Joe Public on this one. Give me Detroit. I have been talking all year about how I think this is the best team in football. I don't think it's close. I think they're playing on a different level. I think that they are a team that embodies the spirit of their head coach. They want to chew you up and spit you out. They murder you in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Their skill players hit you hard. Their secondary on defense hits you harder. They have a wildly underappreciated quarterback under center right now who has literally been perfect a couple of different times this year. He last year proved that outside Jared Goff is still good Jared Goff apparently. Now, who cares if he can't play in the elements? He can play in the rain in Green Bay and still win and look good. So give me the Lions in a game that every single professional on the planet is against me on this one. I just think they're wrong.
Yeah, and I'm going to back those guys because, I mean, with Nico Collins looking to trend back this week and just looking at CJ Stroud as an underdog, 7-4 against the spread versus his record as a favorite, 5-10 against the spread. This is a spot where I think the Houston Texans need this game a heck of a lot more than the Detroit Lions right now, especially one in primetime at home. This is a game where they need to have before they start to feel the heat from a team like the Indianapolis Colts if they win this week, or, start to slip a little bit. And getting Nico Collins back, if he indeed comes back like I think he is going to be a huge addition for this offense this week. And so that's why I'm going to be taking them over the field goal. I think this could be a whoever gets the ball last, and they have to kick a field goal to win the game. I think that's how this goes, but that's going to do it for our bets. To recap real quick, I'm taking Indianapolis +4, Tennessee +7.5, Washington -2.5, Minnesota -6.5, and Houston +3.5. Easton, you were taking New Orleans +3.5, San Francisco -5.5, Denver +7.5, New York -1.5, and then they head-to-head Detroit -3.5. Three favorites, 2 dogs this week for you, and that's going to do it for the Hot Read podcast on this Friday. Easton, as Chef Rand says in the comments, the OG Hot Read, it was good to come back. I think we had a great conversation about Will Levis, and it will be interesting to see how he does this weekend. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages once again for sponsoring the show. And until Tuesday, where we talk and see who was right about Will Levis, but this time with Stoney Keeley, I am your host, JT Ruhnke. We will talk to you then.